Okay, let's get started. Hello, we are here for our 30-minute news hour. My name is Constanza Frischen. I'm a volunteer with Ashoka and your host today. And with us are Stephen Friend and François Taddei. Hey, François and Stephen, you are joining from Paris and Amsterdam, respectively. Both of you widely traveled, so we're catching you in these European cities today. And we'll be speaking for the next 20 minutes about the future of higher education, about the intersection between education, science, AI, tech, the future of the planet. And after that, we'll be transitioning to Q&A, and everyone who is joining us right now on Zoom should see a little Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, so you can type in your question there. All right. Let's get started. So Stephen and François, you are both scientists by background. François, you're an internationally renowned researcher in evolutionary systems biology. You now focus on education as the founder and president of the Learning Planet Institute, building a new kind of university. And Stephen, you have a background in cancer research. You are the co-founder of Sage Bionetworks, which advances biomedical research. You are the founder of For You and Me, that uses AI to advance human-centric healthcare. So let me start with you, Stephen. How did you find your way into working with François on building a new form of university?
I will keep a long story short enough. The intersection actually was enabled initially by international Ashoka connection in Paris, if you may remember, Constanza, where we came in not knowing anything about each other, but quickly realized that for both of us, the scientific questions, as key as they are often adjacent to very important questions that are non-scientific. They're more about how we work with each other, what incents people, how do we tackle it. It's almost like the obstacles that are the ones that become most important are sometimes not technical, but more about how the world frames things. And the link with François and the Learning Planet Institute became more and more obvious as the strangeness of the world became more and more apparent over the last several years, where the needs to heal each other in the planet became central in general to both of us, and of course to François and this powerful new effort that he's leading.
How do you notice, Stephen, in your own work, can you give an example of how you notice the strangeness of the world intersecting, and that it's not just about science, but about more? Can you give us an example?
We've been working on wearables as a means that individuals can be empowered to follow their health and to navigate. And the technical side of it is tricky, but doable.
The wearables just interacting, so like a ring or a watch,
or even just your smartphone. So think of a clinician as having eyes, ears, and fingers to touch, but imagine that those are on, the semi-ubiquitous billion smartphones that are out there, and the ability of capturing what's happening to people, whether it's by their phone or whether it's a smart watch or a smart ring, give an extraordinary ability to capture real-time changes and objectively. And as we have worked to make sense out of that, to see how we could turn it so that individuals could take actions on what's happening to them and do interventions. The much harder part of that is how do clinicians who have one role step back? How do individuals step up? What is it that makes it so that the digital divide, where people feel as if this isn't for me, when in fact it very much is for that person, all become problems that aren't technical problems and more about how we treat ourselves, treat each other, and conceive of our role in the world.
So what you're saying is, so when, let's say, I have a wearable, I'm getting information about my body, about my health, then what kind of action do I take as a next step, and how am I empowered to do something with that data?
Yeah,
it's a great example. And then, sorry, do you want to follow up on that?
And what I was going to say is that what we find, and this is also what Learning Planet is about, is people constrain themselves and are often asleep, not necessarily by the constraints of others, but by their own unapparent to them, going, oh, I can't do this. I'm not empowered to do that. And so it becomes a wider, how do we think of ourselves and what is our role with ourselves, with others, and the planet?
Thank you, Stephen. That's a great segue to you, François, because I want to ask you the same question, really. How did you notice that science, that research was more than just the science, and how did this lead to the building up of the Learning Planet?
You know, I studied evolution and evolution of cooperation. And what I was studying was what happens when individuals overexploit the common resource so much that, you know, at some point there is no more resource and then the whole population will collapse. So I studied these things, you know, with bacteria, and I could show their evolution, their ability to transfer information and to cooperate are, you know, products of evolution. And I was doing these sorts of things, you know, past millennia. So that's how old I am. And then, you know, on September 11, I was in New York. So, you know, I saw ivory towers go down, and I saw that, you know, I needed to start thinking not only of the science for the sake of science and technology for the sake of technology, but what humans do with it. You know, you can use a plane to fly or to destroy your tower. And so the ethical dimension became crucial. And, you know, I was just having children at that period. And, you know, I wanted that, you know, those kids born in the third millennia would have access to a very different life experience than the one that, you know, was happening. And I realized that I needed to invest in more than science, but also in education, in ethics, and make sure that, you know, we educate people not only about science and technology, but also about the ethical consequence of what they do, because that's ultimately rate limiting for our common well-being today, but even more for the well-being of the next generations. And so how can we become good ancestors? How can we, you know, serve the interest of everyone on the planet, including other species, became ever more important, because for science and technology, without this ethical, whether taking ethics into consideration can lead to even destruction of our own species. So, you know, we have to be, we are the product of evolution, but we're a conscious product of our evolution. And we are conscious of the fact that we may get ourselves extinct, which is a very special moment in the history of life. Okay, it was not like this a few centuries ago. And hopefully, you know, we'll find a solution to avoid the worst scenario. But we have to take a step back and think about these issues differently.
And how is that all of that being enabled in the learning environment that you are building? How does that differ from traditional universities?
So first, what we've been building was co-design by students for students. So that was, I think, the most important innovation that we did, especially in the French setting. But for some reason, what we've done has doubled in size every 18 months for nearly 20 years now. So we are going beyond the walls of the institute we've built. that has 7,000 square meters in Paris. And we are, collaborating with UNESCO and with about 600 organizations as we speak. And the numbers is growing very fast, and tens of thousands of people around the planet that want to join forces so that everyone can learn to care for self, others, and the planet. And as Stephen was saying, even heal self, others, and the planet, because it's not enough to prevent problems. We have also to heal some of the problems. I mean, humanity is at a turning point where, for long, we solved problems faster than we created them. But at the moment, we're creating problems faster than we're solving them. So something got wrong. And that's because, there is unintended consequences of what we do that we have not been able to anticipate, like climate change is one example.
How do you see the role of artificial intelligence? And I'm asking against the background that obviously, large language models have made a huge leap forward over the last year. We are seeing, rapid advances in AI. And as you said before, François, a plane can be a tool to fly or a tool to destroy. So I wonder how that, how you factor that in the education of your students and how you reflect on that in your own research. It's a question to both you and Stephen.
So, my personal answer would be that in the age of AI, you not only have to learn to code the AI, you also can learn thanks to the AI, but you should also learn to do things without the AI. Like, maybe connect to yourself, to others, and to nature. And that's probably not the AI that will help you to do this. But in the same time, you have to learn to make sure that the ratio of intelligence to ethics is very variable across time and space. And some humans that were super intelligent, but very little ethics, had created more problems than we would want. And the machine, if it's more intelligent than us in at least some dimensions and less ethical than us in many dimensions, that might create even more problems. So we have to think not only of the coevolutions of human and artificial intelligence, which is already a very complex problem, but that's a problem that's, I think we can try to work on. But we also should think about the ethics of the machine itself, and the ethics of those that code the machine, and the ethics of, or species as a whole in the age of AI is maybe even more important.
And just a quick follow-on on that. I think there is sufficient conversation about sort of concerns on how AI may have biases and sort of the equivalent of runaway AI. A thing that has been on our minds, my mind, is more the reality of how flawed we as humans are, right? That AI, a system that sits inside our skull, our brain, and how warped and biased it is, and more importantly, how the power, those that have powers, whether it's in companies or countries, set the stage for what I'd call common sense is, and may not be common sense. And the frailty of us as humans puts, I think, our species in a risky place. And here's an interesting idea. For some of the tools that when you bring AI in, that equivalent of preferential bias is actually less in the sorting and in the sort of capturing of answers than the biases that we bring to the system. And I'm imagining that whether maybe AI could actually be a neutral assistant to help us with some of the biases that get built up, that have us forgetting the impact of climate, or have us buying clothes when it's causing problems to the planet, or. So remember, it can go both ways.
It's a really important point that our own AI in the brain is also deeply biased and deeply flawed, as are the machines. So how do you think what you said right now, what are practical ways of conveying that to the students, and how do students learn and engage with these questions in the best possible way in your experience?
Let me do a quick one then over to François. I mean, I think the most important thing is most education is completely built to give you a way of using the past to move into the future, as if the past is the cornerstone for what will come. And the ability to give individuals not just knowledge, but as François will talk about, knowledge, skills, ethics, and work in a community. Imagine that in order to heal the planet, et cetera, that actually individuals who wanted to be game changers had in-depth way of thinking of consequences. Let's call it ethics. And the same time working in communities while gathering the knowledge and skills that usually are done in universities that are almost like cloistered from the real world. So imagine that by being within the world, by working on projects that you're passionate about, and by having particular courses that are built to get that grounding. François, you may be able to say it better.
No, I think you said it beautifully. Just to complement, I think that historically speaking, the ethics was, what are the consequences, not only on yourself, but also on others, not only on short term, but also possibly on long term. And now I think it's not only local, but it should also be global. And so the ability to think ethically in the interest of more than yourself, but was historically restrained to the people you interacted with, typically your tribe or your family. But progressively what has happened is that we've extended that notion of the consequence to others, to the city walls, and that's where we define citizenship, and then progressively to the national scale. And I think now we need it to the planetary scale. That's why we are talking about what we call planetizenship, because historically citizenship has not been very inclusive. Women were not citizens, children are not citizens, migrants are not citizens, and the city walls have separated humans from nature. So by trying to think about planetizenship, we can try to be more inclusive and more ecological and think about the long-term consequence at the planetary scale of our actions.
I see the first questions rolling in from the audience, and there's one that's a beautiful follow-up question to what you guys just said. It is a question: many universities are struggling to remain relevant in a world where it's less clear what jobs are going to be most needed. How do we need higher education to shift? What are some practical things that are working and that we can manage to adapt in time?
So what I would say is that historically, the universities have transferred the knowledge of the past to the new generation, assuming that what would be needed for tomorrow was close enough to what was needed yesterday. And it worked more or less, even though there might be conflict between the ancient and the creative minds that wanted something else. But what's happening today is that first, the recipe of yesterday have caused the problems of today. And second, that the world is changing so fast that what was true yesterday may not be as relevant tomorrow. And so we have to go from students competing on yesterday's knowledge to learners cooperating on today's challenges so that they can build a future. And that's a very different paradigm. And that's a paradigm that can be co-designed with the youth themselves. And universities are coming from evolutionary biology. I know that if you evolve slower than your environment, you might become obsolete before you know it. Might be true of your profession, true of your of the way you learn and so on, or the way you teach. And so if we are in this fast changing environment, we have to learn differently than yesterday. And so we have to co-design new learning methods with the new generations in the age of AI, so that we can address planetary issues. And that's why we're thinking of, redesigning radically the university in this age, so that we can build a planetary university, a planetizen university, to train those that, want to contribute to heal not only themselves and their community, but also the planetary concerns.
And just coming back to, sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
Just a quick thing on that. Taking off from that, I think this aspect is important in terms of many university degrees seeming irrelevant because they're not giving information, and the jobs that are out there that are needed aren't actually seeing that which a person is learning in a university as what is needed. So in some ways, I feel as if it's the fact that universities are becoming irrelevant, that it's essential to have a way where the individuals who are having anxiety can get moved to more of a collective intelligence. I think when I look back over things that had gone or wish I had gone differently, most of the time it's because it was hard to find the real problem, the real obstacle that needed to be solved, not the one that sat in front of you. Mm-hmm. And that skill, right, which is not generally taught, like how is it do you find the real aspect of the obstacle, of the inadvertent consequences, or the root cause of why people have framed it in the narrow ways that they do? I think that is what we're hoping the university will give if it's trying to evolve to planet citizens.
Coming back to the opportunity of AI, I mean, there's this hope that as the machine takes over most of the repetitive tasks and the sort of data analyzing tasks, it sets us free for creative tasks. There's actually also a great question in the audience that someone is saying, there is a friend of mine teaches writing at a community college and senses that the shift he'll have to manage is away from teaching the mechanical construction of sentences, which AI will take over, and instead helping students develop taste and personal style. So tech in support of human creativity and authenticity. Do you guys see that this way? Can you react to that?
Yeah, one way to, I've just learned a creative writer using AI in an interesting way, is giving his current chapter to the machine and ask for a follow-up. And then what it does, it says, he writes something very different from any of the options proposed by the machine, so that he forces himself to be, away from what the machine knows, which is sort of synthesis of the past. So it, enables that author to be as creative as possible. So I think, you can use the machines in very different ways, to develop your critical thinking, for instance, by, criticizing what the machine proposed, or go more creative. And I think that indeed we have to go beyond this, but we can also use the machine as a stepping stone towards more things. For instance, I played asking the machine, if there was a galactic committee to come and study our civilization to know if we were truly an advanced planet or not, what do you think would be the opinion of that committee on our planetary situation? And I got very stimulating conversation with the machine based on that prompt. And so you can, prompt the machine to explore and synthesize a huge amount of knowledge. I asked, for instance, what would be planets and ethics? And, I got some interesting proposal. I asked, how different would be that from religion? It said, well, it would be science-based, and it would be a synthesis of, the wisdom of the different traditions. And I asked, what are the different traditions bringing to the planets and ethics of today? And, it helped me formulate some of this. So, I mean, you can use it in very creative ways to go beyond what you can do alone. And that's interesting.
Yeah, think of current universities as having a vast majority based on ensuring that people know facts. And then think of a ladder between facts, relationships, and consequences. And think what a powerful thing it can be to have an assistant there at the level of the facts that allows you with those facts to start, whether it's in chemistry or physics or in philosophy, have a way of then getting to the things that really you want people to be having their own input on, which is those relations and consequences. So I think it really changes what it is that needs to be carried around in the AI that's in your skull versus the one that you can have that helps you.
Mm-hmm. That's a great segue to another question from the audience. Someone's saying, I'm seeing a growing number of scientists sounding the alarm about neural rights as more AI-enabled brain interfaces become a reality. What do you think we need to put in place to safeguard us from the unintended consequences of these technologies? Stephen,
well, I'll have to pick up on that, and then I'll go to Francois. I don't know why, but it may be the things that were happening recently in the Middle East and other places. But I'm struck by how much our own brains are squeezed into a narrow space of being able to frame things by the media, by what is put in front of us. And so I would say that the concern that AI is going to go wild and do something, or even the adjacency that we're going to give our biases to AI. Imagine how helpful it would be if actually something that existed in a neutral stance might actually help some of those strange ways that we can get to where we don't get concerned about what's happening to the planet. We don't get concerned what's happening to individuals' rights and the ability to protest and things like that. So I feel as if I'm going to tip it back and remember we are flawed, right? We're not.
Yeah, what I would say to the ability, the for me risk of connecting human brains directly through digital interface without critical thinking as a barrier, is that already we are being manipulated by lots of social media and fake news. But those of us that have at least some critical thinking can escape this. But when you know about the fact that viruses are always in advance and that hackers always find the holes in any system of defense, it's pretty clear that if we had direct digital interface, some hackers or some governments will find a way to manipulate us even more than today. So for me, that's a major risk, and I would certainly not want this, not for myself or for my children or for any of my planetists and human fellows on this planet. Another question that is being asked to us, I see time is running out, is what sort of partners we're looking for. We are basically looking for very different type of partners, some that can bring content that can be useful in that context of this planetary university, those that can bring communities, and those that can bring all sorts of resource, including intellectual resource or financial resource or professional resource that can help grow such a planetary university. And I think what we need ultimately is we have planetary resource like the quality of the air, the biodiversity, the quality of the climate, quality of water and oceans and so on. But those resources are being exhausted, okay? And so we have to protect those. We also have intellectual resource. And those resources, some people are trying to privatize them, some people are, polluting it with fake news or and so on. And then we have digital resource like the internet and AI and open software and so on. I think we need more of these planetary common goods, and we need also the safeguards to make sure that those high quality resources are not overwhelmed with pollution of some sort or overexhausted. And so for us, this planetary university is like a new planetary commons where students should learn to care for the existing commons while creating new commons such as new knowledge, new software, and new solutions for humanity that they want to share. That's the sort of things. And so any partners that want to do this is obviously very welcome to contribute.
Thank you so much, François. And last question to both of you. If you see a student, let's say 20 years out from now, how paint us the picture, how they will learn. Will they be sitting in a building? Will they be sitting at home? Will they interact in a small space and a large space? What do you think that will look like?
Well, I think that 20 years from now, that person will be most importantly connected deeply. So whether they're in a small space momentarily or a larger space, I think the idea of being embedded within a community that has the connections to those, we talk about, on the shoulders of giants, this integration towards not just those that might be considered teachers, but learners. It's the joint ability to be working in real time with others that will feel quite different, I think, than this idea that there are individuals trying to get the #1 position in their class in order to get XXXX.
Thank you, Stephen. François?
Yeah, lovely question. I think that students should be able to learn to solve real-world problems. And I think that maybe one day there will be no more real-world problems, and then there will be a new problem, which is what you do then. Okay, but until that time happens, until there is always real-world problems, the ability to solve real-world problems will be an asset. And in order to solve those problems, those students would be empowered by collective intelligence and artificial intelligence, and they will contribute their solution to the common pool of solutions while stepping on the shoulders of giants that have found previous solutions. And that should be as fluid as possible, and so that this can happen not only in a specific setting like a classroom, but in the real world where you're facing personal challenges, community challenges, and planetary challenges. If we were to learn to do this in a very fluid, open, and creative way, I think every one of us will feel better for it, and the planet and the future generation even more.
Thank you so much, both of you, Stephen and François, for this discussion. It was great, and we have to wrap up, unfortunately. I wish we could go on, but thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you for the audience for listening in, and wishing everyone a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.